Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to review the Almaden Valley, California real estate market analysis for April 2009. My name is Robert Whitelaw, and I'm a licensed real estate broker in the state of California. I'm also a member of the National Association of Realtors and a certified ePro, and I'm also the president and CEO of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services, sponsoring this presentation. Now, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can find all of my previous market analysis videos. You can also find my weekly podcasts and also articles I've written on real estate at my website at www.soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to get in contact with me via email, please just send those to robert@soldbyrobert.com. If you prefer to talk on the telephone, feel free to dial 408-852-0525. And if you're a online message application user, feel free to contact me via AOL Instant Messenger, Google Talk, and Yahoo IM using the screen name The Rebel Broker. And if you're a Skype user, Rebel Broker is the only screen name you need. Referrals are always appreciated. If you or anyone you know is interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate in Silicon Valley, please feel free to get in touch. And finally, if you are interested in real estate anywhere in the United States, just get in contact with me using any of the methods I've listed above, and I will help find the perfect agent for your needs. Now let's go ahead and jump in and take a look at the supply and demand numbers for Almaden Valley. We'll start off, as we always do, with those inventory numbers, and you can see we've had a pretty steady increase. It's not as bad as we see in some communities or indeed in the county in general, but it's definitely been an upturn. Almaden Valley has been one of those communities that has actually managed to do fairly well. You can see that actually while other inventories were going up in 2007, we actually saw inventories drop in Almaden Valley, which is kind of unique. There were only a few other places that managed to pull that off, but you can see that in 2008 and now in 2009, those numbers have definitely gone up. In fact, from April of 2008 to April of 2009, we saw inventory numbers increase by 28.81% in Almaden Valley. That's an increase of 34 homes in inventory, so 34 more homes on the market now than at the same time last year. Now, that gave us a grand total of 152 homes currently on the market in Almaden Valley. If we take a look at the total number of homes listed, now these are just the homes that were added to the marketplace, you can see that, again, while other areas saw very large increases from 2005, 2006 on, Almaden Valley has actually enjoyed pretty steady performance. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen gradual increases, not gigantic increases as we have in some other areas, but still heading in a direction that indicates that perhaps some of these down market effects are actually starting to show themselves here in Almaden Valley. Now, that gave us a increase in new listings of 8.93%. That's 5 more homes listed in Almaden Valley in April of 2009 than April of 2008, for a total of 61 homes listed in the month of April. If we now shift our attention over to sales, we can see sales are down. Now, you can see it's actually gone down quite a bit since 2007. Again, all of this mess sort of started in 2006 when we first started seeing numbers going bad in a variety of different areas in the county in general. But the market in Almaden Valley managed to stay fairly strong. Even in 2007, we started to see some downturn in 2008. We're seeing that inventory number continuing to increase, and we saw sales actually decrease by about 15.79%. That was 3 fewer homes listed in April of 2009 than in April of 2008. That gave us a grand total of 16 homes sold in the month of April. Now, as we always like to do, let's take a look at what this means for the ratio, and that's the relationship between the total number of homes in inventory and the total number of homes sold. And it gives us an idea of how the market's performing from 2 different perspectives. The first one is how many months worth of inventory do we currently have on hand, and that just gives you an idea of if all the numbers froze as they are now, if we were stuck with the inventory we have right now and the sales numbers we have right now, how many months would it take to sell every home currently in inventory? And that number stands at 9.5, so it would take us 9.5 months to sell all the inventory we currently have on hand in Almaden Valley. Now, to contrast that, last month it was at 12.6%, or 12.6 months. So that's actually a pretty good change. But the county was at 5.4. So right now, Almaden Valley is performing poorly compared to the average for the entire county, which is a little unusual. Almaden Valley was actually outperforming the county through most of this down market. So we're sort of seeing Almaden Valley being a late hit as far as the down economy, the down real estate market. Now, I mentioned that there were two ways to look at that ratio of 9.5. We've already covered how long it would take to sell off the inventory. The other is to think of it as a competition number. If you're a seller and you're considering listing your home, or your home is on the market right now, it's a way of looking at the market that gives you an idea of how many homes you have to compete with. So for every home that sells, there are about 9 homes out there trying to get sold. So that means you have to beat out, as a seller, 9 other properties in order to get your home sold. So a lot of this has to do with the competition on the marketplace. What this really tells most sellers out there is make sure and pay attention to who your competition is. Make sure you've seen those other homes out there and make sure that you're priced accordingly, because if there's folks out there offering more at about the same price point, your home is not going to be one of those 9 that gets sold. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these same numbers, just going over past months now. So the numbers we just looked at were strictly the month of April going back to 1999. So that you didn't have to worry about adjusting for seasonal influences. It was just months of April, taking little snapshots going all the way back to 1999. And it gives you kind of just a way to sort of look at the market overall and see, and looking back, see how things have performed. But right now what we want to do is just look at how things have been going in the very short term. So now this is going back to November of 2007, and these are just the inventory numbers. And one key reason I like to present these particular slides is we're not only going to look back and see how things have been going, but we're going to see if there's any relationship, if the relationship fits closely enough with what's happened in the past. It might give us a way to anticipate what we can expect in the coming months. And so this is sort of a way to try and look into the crystal ball and figure out where the market might go. Now, in terms of inventory, we can see we've actually gone up. Inventory is actually up 9.35% from March of 2009. That is 13 more homes on the market than last month. But let's go ahead and take a look back to April of last year. You can see April of 08. Now, what was the relationship leading up to April of 08? Well, we can see sort of the same performance, relatively flat between March and April, a relatively small increase between March and April of last year. But the months preceding it had a pretty dramatic upturn. So from December going all the way up to April was a pretty much of a ramping of inventory. And we saw the exact same performance last year. On a year-to-year comparison basis, we can definitely conclude that we're trending in the same ways on a month-to-month basis as we did last year. So given that, let's go ahead and push forward and assume that we can expect the same type of general trends in the coming months. So that would want us to look into, well, we're in April, so what's going to happen in May and June and July? Well, if we do that comparison, we can see that what we're probably going to see is a flat performance for April. Going on into May, we may see things increase a bit of a peak there in June. And then in July, we'll see things start to decrease. I would expect that that's probably correct. I don't think that we're going to see a huge variation in how things go. So I think the overall lesson here is that we're definitely going to see an increase in inventory, unless the one thing that may happen, and we should have already started to see hints of that now, so it makes me hesitate to think that that's what's going to happen. If we start to see a big selling season pop up in the months of July, we may see those numbers go down. Frankly, I don't see that coming. So I wouldn't take that as an indicator. Let's just take what we've got, what we saw last year, and since we've so closely emulated what happened last year, I think you can make a pretty good bet that we're going to see the same sort of trending over the next few months that we saw last year at the same time. Now let's go ahead and take a look at these are the number of homes that were listed in each month. Now, as you can see from the general trend numbers for inventory, things have been going pretty steeply up. Same thing goes for the homes listed, more homes being added on the market. Now, this isn't a good thing. When you couple this with down sales, it really tends to spell a very big ramping up of inventory numbers, just because we're not selling them off enough and we're adding too many homes per month to be able to keep up with it really in any way at all. Now, if we look at these numbers, obviously we can see the general trend is up, but let's take a look at last year and see where everything went. Now, April of last year, we saw a little bit different performance. April of last year was actually down from March of the previous month. April was actually sort of a peak. We saw some building up to it. So actually the number of homes listed is down a little bit. Same general trends with a ramp up from January going to February and then March, general increases, a little bit more dramatic increases this year around. It may be that folks are who have been enjoying a market that hasn't really hit so hard in Almaden, getting all the news and seeing how things are going elsewhere in the county, maybe folks are jumping into the market now to try and take advantage of what they see as Almaden Valley's ability until now to actually sort of avoid this downturn, and thinking this may be their time to just get out, to sell their properties, why it tends to be at a high point. And we'll see in another slide or two how prices are doing in Almaden, but we'll save that information for then. Let's take a look at the sales. Are they up? Are they down? They're actually up compared to last month. Now, before we move on, though, let me point out that the number of homes that were listed was actually down month to month from March to April. It was down by 4.69%. That's 3 fewer homes listed in the month of April than in March. Now, sales are actually up 45.45%. That's 5 more homes sold in the month of April than the month of March. So that's actually pretty good news. But let's look back to last year and see what the trend was. Again, the trend was in the same direction. We actually saw between March and April of last year a more substantial increase in sales. So we're seeing sales increasing, but sluggish compared to the performance we saw last year. Not by a whole lot, but by enough to make you wonder or question whether or not we're going to get a sales run as high as we got last year. Now, if you look at last year, you can see that in those follow-up months, in May, we saw a big increase in sales in Almaden Valley, with continuing sales all the way through till August. So the whole summer season, things sort of ramped up there and then stayed at that point for several months. Now, my guess would be that in the coming months, we'll see an increase in sales, but that things will perhaps not increase by as much as they did last year, and they'll probably stay there at about the same amount of time. But those will be some real telling numbers. It'll be interesting to see where those go. And see if we can't take care of some of those inventory numbers through sales. That would actually be a big relief to the market. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the short sales and foreclosures. This is another area where Almaden Valley has outperformed the county with almost non-existent short sale and foreclosure numbers. The bottom line is that this is a market where folks haven't seen the property values drop below what they owe on these homes. So there really hasn't been any short sale or foreclosure action. If we look at this month, however, we can see that while conventional sales are still exceptionally high at 88%, foreclosures and short sales are definitely there. Now, we had a couple of homes that fit into the mix here that were short sales and foreclosures. Now, by comparison, 62% of the homes that sold in the county were short sales and foreclosures. The majority of the homes that sold in the county in general were short sales or foreclosures. So Almaden Valley is far outperforming the county in this respect. Now, if we take a look at the same things last month, we can see last year was 100% conventional. In March, there were no short sales or foreclosures in Almaden Valley. I don't know if I'd call this a trend. There are definitely some areas of Almaden that have been hit a little bit harder than others as far as devaluation goes, which obviously brings us up to foreclosures and short sales. Although while that's true primarily for short sales, foreclosures can also have other things influencing them as to why they happen. Foreclosure simply means that the folks are unable to make the payments. It could have to do with the unemployment numbers. A lot of other things might play into that. The bottom line here, though, for folks to take who are interested in either buying or trying to sell in Almaden Valley, not a lot of action as far as short sales and foreclosures are concerned, and I don't foresee this being an indicator of a trend that's going to be coming, simply because we're really just talking about 2 properties that fell under the category of short sales or foreclosures. All right, now let's go ahead and take a look at sale home prices, what homes sold for in Almaden Valley in April of 2009. Now, the first number we're going to look at is the average price. Now, we can see that things have been hit a bit here. We've seen that we had our peak in 2006, and things fairly steadily decreased from 2006 to 2009. Now, while a lot of people would look at this and get more concerned as a percentage, it's actually not that bad. Now, we have seen our biggest decrease between 2008 and 2009, which is a little bit off from other communities. Most other communities did not see this big of a drop from 2008 and 2009. Most got their big hit from 2007 to 2008. So this is a little bit unique for Almaden Valley. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now, remember, we're talking about a relatively small sample of homes selling in Almaden Valley, but let's go ahead and run down the average numbers here. Now, the average home price was down 17.76. That was a dollar change of $187,735 with an average home price of $869,159. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the median price as well. This is actually kind of interesting, too, that you can see that the average and the median have moved closer together, and what the median basically tells you is the number of homes that have sold, how many are above the average and how many are below the average. So when you look at that green bar, half the homes that sold below that price marked, and half the homes sold above that price marked. So you can see that the distribution here is fairly even. The average and the median are fairly close together, telling us that we really do have a number here that sort of reflects the center of the market, where half the homes sold above that and half the homes sold below it. Okay, so the median change is actually down 11.58%. That's a $110,000 decrease. The median price was $840,000. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the extreme ends of the scale here on properties that sold in Almaden Valley. The highest priced home was on 20421 Hunters Hill Road. That sold for $1,224,000. It was originally listed for $1,525,000. It was on the market for 148 days. The lowest priced property was on 1019 Kisser Drive, and that sold for $561,888. And this is actually this is kind of a sad story on this property. It was listed originally for $549, so it actually sold for more than what that supposed list price was. But then when you look into it a little bit more, you discover that back in 2008, they tried to sell that property and had listed it for $580,000. It was bought in 2005 for $750,000. So while the reported days on market is 11 days, in reality, for about 3 months they attempted to sell it in 2008. Then took quite a few months off because they couldn't get it done. What's also strange is that it actually started off listed as $549,000. It got raised to $580,000 10 days later. So I'm not real sure what was going on there. It might have just been entered incorrectly, but it's a shame it went down like that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at home prices just over the past months. We'll again look at the average price first. You can see obviously that the trend here is downward, as we've seen in general. The average home price, again, $869,159. Percentage price change down 11.02% from last month. So between March and April, the price went down 11.02%. That's a $107,679 price drop. Median price change from March to April was an increase of 1.2%. That's a $10,000 value increase. What's interesting is that I think what we saw here is that instead of there being this dramatic of a change, I think that the real numbers were just a little bit more accurate this month. Every once in a while, you'll get things that get skewed one direction or another based on a very expensive home selling. And this month, what we saw was that the median and the average, again, were just very close to each other. A volume of 16 homes sold. But again, the trend is pretty tough to resist. We've definitely got a downward trend. And that's going to continue as we see inventory numbers increasing like this. And I know that this might shock some folks, but this is actually a good thing. The one surest way to take care of a high inventory is to see a reduction in prices. Now, for a long time, there were communities that when their inventories were going up, their prices weren't going down. So they just accumulated more and more inventory. And so when that price adjust finally did come, it took a big price adjust to get things to even move. Since Almaden Valley, and this may have more to do, since the sellers may be more willing to adjust their prices simply because they've been so beaten over the head over the last 2 years with how bad the market is, whereas when it first started a couple of years ago, it took a long time for sellers to realize, yeah, the market is really bad. This time around, we're seeing maybe a little bit more flexibility on the part of sellers who realize that these prices have to come down. And Almaden Valley obviously is showing signs of that. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the days to sell. This is how long it's taking sellers to get their homes off the market. Now remember, these numbers just reflect the homes that have actually sold. This isn't a number telling you, how long every home on the market has been on the market. This is strictly just telling you how long the ones that actually sold have been on the market. Now this is just comparing past years. So this is the month of April going all the way back to 1999. We can see that on that comparison, we're actually doing a little better than the same time last year. The days to sell is actually down 16.88%. That's 13 fewer days to get a home sold in April of 2009 than in April of 2008. So that's actually some pretty good news. Now, the lowest days on market in April of 2009 was 4. So the lowest was 4 days to get a home sold. The highest was 195 days, with the next closest behind it being 162 days. Now, as I always do, I review these numbers to kind of see if there's anything that's really going to throw things off. And frankly, it's a pretty even spread of how long it took to get each home sold. So I'm not going to adjust any of these numbers to try to make them more realistic. I think this is a fairly realistic estimation of how long you folks can expect to get your home sold in Almaden Valley. Now, let's sort of just to sort of get a perspective on how this breaks down, let's take a look at different segments of time and see how long it's taking to get the homes sold. Now, no homes were sold before they got put onto the MLS. 1 home was sold in the first week. 4 homes were sold in 8 to 30 days. 8 homes were sold in 31 to 90 days. 2 homes were sold in 90 to 180 days, and 1 home was sold at over 180 days. Now, if we sort of break that down and try to maybe extract as much good news from this as possible, about 31% of the homes sold in 30 days or less. So that's pretty good, but it's actually a lot lower than it was last month, where we had 63% of the homes that sold in 30 days or less. So what's the takeaway from this particular chart? I think for sellers, it is prepare to be on the market with your home for at least 60 days. I don't think it's unreasonable to expect it to take that long. As long as you're doing all your other things right, you should be able to get that home sold in under the 60 days we're seeing here as the average for April of 2009. Now let's go ahead and take a look at days to sell. This time we'll look at just going back months all the way to November of 2007. Now we can see that this is a fairly increasing number just over the course of the last year. We've had our peak obviously in the wintertime. That's fairly normal. One thing to note is that, as I've mentioned in other presentations, when we start to see sales increasing, you'll often see days to sell increase. And the reason for that is because you're getting rid of homes that have been in the inventory for a longer period of time. So usually when you see an increase in sales, you'll see an increase in days on market. And a lot of times you'll see that reflected in some numbers where it's pretty dramatic where the sales have increased. So always keep in mind that these the number of homes sold versus the days on market, they tend to be opposite influencers. So when one goes up, the other tends to go down a little bit until you get yourself into a stabilized market. In a market like we have now, where there's so many homes in inventory, this tends to be the way this works. Now, days to sell, it's up 93.94% from March to April. That's a 31-day increase, and that's a pretty dramatic increase. I think last month was just a little bit of a little one-off month that had some strange numbers in there that brought this number down artificially, with properties that just tended to sell relatively quickly. I don't think there's a lot of conclusions you can draw from this that are dramatic in any way. I don't think there's anything from this we can take away and say, wow, what changed in the market? I think this just really has to do with how the numbers go sometimes on a month-to-month basis. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the locations of where these properties are located that did sell. We can see it's a pretty even spread of properties, everything from the southeast end all the way up to the northwest. All area, and actually, I'm actually used to not seeing quite so much selling down at the southeastern end, just because the commute can get pretty tough down there. And I know a lot of folks I show properties to in Almaden Valley. You know, you'll get driving to a certain distance down Almaden Road or down Camden, and folks will just say, you know, this is just too far for the commute. So it's good to see actually that we're seeing some of those properties down at that end sell. I actually used to live down at that end, just north of Bret Harte, and it's a beautiful area. So there's really no reason to avoid it. I think it's worth those extra few minutes of commute for folks who've bothered to look and ended up buying down there. So it's good to see that we were seeing a nice even spread. Now, I do appreciate you taking the time to listen to what I have to say on these market analysis. If you'd like to look at anything else I've produced on real estate, whether it's a video or podcast or article, please look for those at www.soldbyrobert.com. If you'd like to email me, once again, that's at robert@soldbyrobert.com. Phone number 408-852-0525. If you'd like to use AOL Instant Messenger, Google Talk, or Yahoo IM, the Rebel Broker is the screen name. Skype screen name is Rebel Broker. Of course, referrals are always appreciated. And if you need a real estate agent for any needs you have anywhere in the United States, whether you're buying, selling, or investing, get in touch with me. We'll figure out exactly what you need, and I'll find the right agent for you. Thanks again, and I will talk to you all next time.